and welcome to a new episode of A Dynasty Mind. My name is Chris Chung. This is a feature from Fake Pigskin. Tonight I am joined by Liz Loza from Yahoo Sports. Liz, how are you doing tonight?
I'm great, Chris. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited now that the 4th of July is over. It always feels like fantasy season starts the following week. And so I'm excited to start diving in and getting an early start on all of these prospects.
Absolutely. Once July hits, I'm realizing, we're about 2 months away from kickoff, and it's an exciting time. Well, what most people probably don't know is you on your podcast, the His and Hers podcast. That was my first ever appearance on any sort type of media, and I really like to take this opportunity to thank you for just helping me jumpstart and getting into this fantasy football things. So, how are things been since then?
Well, you're welcome, first of all, for having you on the pod. I always like to find new voices and people who are doing interesting things. So I book the guests. So I appreciate you coming on, and I'm glad that it's launched other things in your career. X's and Y's, I'm going to say, because I've been getting tweets about it. X's and Y's, the His and Hers Guide to Fantasy Football that John Evans and I do together will be back up and running on a regular basis come August. So we're taking the rest of the month of July off. John is getting married over Labor Day weekend, so he needs a little bit of extra time, and I'm happy to give it to him. As for the off season, I don't know about this off season of which you speak. I don't really have one of those. I went straight from the Super Bowl into the Olympic coverage this past year.
Wow.
And right from the Olympics into watching a bunch of rookie tape, because I have to be completely honest that I cannot watch. I spend every Sunday at the office I leave my house at 6 a.m. and I don't come home till 7 p.m. every Sunday during the season. And so to watch all of that football again on Saturday and totally ingest as deeply and intensely as I do pro football is too much. So I usually, after the Super Bowl, will go back and watch the Senior Bowl and then start watching tape on prospects and doing my rankings. So after I finished Olympic coverage this past year, I just started digging in on rookies, finding my favorites. Anthony Miller was a top wide receiver of mine, and I was thrilled to see him drafted fairly early, at least earlier than a lot of people anticipated. Equanimous St. Brown was another guy I really liked. I did not expect him to go to Green Bay, but I think it's a nice fit, and I do think that he will outlast Geronimo Allison, who everyone is touting as this sleeper, but I think that's just plug-and-play analysis. I don't think Allison has the skill that St. Brown does. It won't happen immediately, excuse me, but for a dynasty pod, I think Equanimous St. Brown and that Green Bay offense is someone to watch. I just went off on a tangent there, so I apologize.
It's that feeling that you get that we do not actually feel any off season as a fantasy football player. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're heavily invested in the seasonal every redraft type of format. Maybe delve into some DFS, but Dynasty has not yet been a part of your. Are you part of a Dynasty? I'm sorry, that's more.
Oh no, I have Dynasty leagues. Actually, went to the Super Bowl in my Dynasty league last year. It's a 14-team Dynasty league. I've been in it for a bunch of years with the fantasy football guys who were the ones who gave me my first start in the podcasting space a bunch of years ago when I first began my career in fantasy. And Kevin, who is one of the co-hosts, beat me in the Super Bowl. He rolled out Todd Gurley.
Oh my gosh!
And as a Rams fan, as you can clearly tell, it was I was definitely a bittersweet. I was rooting for Gurley as a Rams fan, but watching him bury me personally hurt a bit. But I will say professionally, you are correct. Yahoo doesn't have a strictly Dynasty product. So most of my work leans towards redraft and DFS, since we do have obviously a redraft product, and we launched 2 years ago a DFS product. So personally, I love to play Dynasty, but my articles and video work is mostly on seasonal.
Because I have to say, your preparation fits more in the mold of a Dynasty owner, having that tracking the rookies right after Super Bowl is over, and then you're already delving in how they fit. You already look at the teams, you already look at how the drafts unfold, and now we're paying attention to training camp and hope nobody does anything boneheaded. We're going to leave the LeSean McCoy things aside for now, because we let that play out a little bit, but that came as a shock.
We need to let it play out, Chris. I mean, whether or not like he's guilty of this issue, I'm not going to dig into that. But do we really believe Shady McCoy at this point to be a good human being? Like, he's not. You can still draft him, but once I saw the invitation and the required dress for the party he so generously hosted a couple of years ago, I am not of the belief that he is, has that incredible of a moral compass, shall we say.
Yeah, and definitely it does not reflect well. This definitely will put he's on the tail end of his career, as well as most of us expect, and really, what value does he have in a dynasty sense? I don't know. We'll see what goes on, and these are some of the stories that we do have to track because they keep happening, and we have to be on our guards and be able to just prepare ourselves well. Now, segueing into that, what has been some of your thoughts on the 2018 season? Your early thoughts on what you see, what you hear, and how people prepare for the draft, and your sense.
I mean, the thing that I am finding the most different about this year, obviously for a long time it was draft your running backs early. Then then the consensus started to pull away from that, and zero RB was the hot new strategy. I always feel like the best strategy is the one that wins. So whatever works for you. But this year, the thing that I am recognizing is the incredible depth at the quarterback position. And for a long time in expert leagues or professional drafts, whatever you want to call them, waiting on a quarterback was commonplace. And certainly waiting on a quarterback was more popular in, quote, expert circles than in, quote, layman circles or civilian circles. But I think this year, and this was prompted because I went on Dr. Roto's Sirius XM show last week, and he started asking me about Andrew Luck. And my answer was, I mean, I love Doc, but my answer was, I don't care. I don't have to make this gamble. Like, whether or not Andrew Luck throws a regulation-sized football, the Duke, or a high school's, I don't care, because I don't need, this seems like a ridiculous gamble to try to make when you look at the depth at the position. I mean, you have guys like Matt Stafford, who I think gets a bad rap, but if you look at the numbers, ever since Jim Bob Cooter came in as the offensive coordinator, he's been a top 8 fantasy producer for 3 consecutive years. I mean, his interceptions have decreased. He had 10 in 2016 and 2017. His YPA has gone up 7.9 last year. His completion percentages have gone up. It was 65.7% in 2017. They've got an upgraded offensive line that they worked on via the draft. They actually have a backfield, you'd think now, that they worked on via the draft, adding Kerryon Johnson in the second round. He's got 4 top-notch receiving threats: Golden Tate, Marvin Jones, Kenny Golladay, who I do believe will break out this year, and Theo Riddick, who basically works as a slot receiver. So when you can get this guy, and he's like depending on if you're using FF Calculator or MFL's ADP, he's going somewhere between, the earliest I've seen him go is the 10th quarterback off the board. The latest I've seen him go is the 14th quarterback off the board. I don't care about Andrew Luck. I don't have to care about Andrew Luck. You also have Kirk Cousins going a little ahead of Matt Stafford, but not by so much. He's going after Andrew Luck, in fact. And when you see what Cousins did last year, putting an absolutely hobbled and clueless Redskins team on his back and passing for over 4,000 yards and 31 touchdowns, I mean, Kirk Cousins has been a top 10 fantasy producer for 3 straight years. He's been a top 5 option in back-to-back seasons. He's going from a bottom-ranked O-line to a top 6 pass-protecting unit in Minnesota. he's got John DeFilippo, the QB wizard, helping him out. And John DeFilippo, by the way, you talked about keeping up on narratives and storylines and mini camps and OTAs. I mean, John DeFilippo, during a press conference, said outwardly that he plans to focus on Cousins' efficiency in the red zone. That means more touchdowns. I am in favor of all of that. So there's another great of value at quarterback. I mean, when you look at the ADP of these guys, I don't need to reach for a quarterback. I don't need to gamble on Andrew Luck. And I feel like this kind of depth allows me, I'm even noticing it right now in the Scott Fish Bowl.
Yes.
This is a super flex league where, you know, last year, if you didn't have your quarterback by round 2, you were SOL.
Oh my gosh, yes.
You know, I just got my first quarterback in the 4th round. And I did, by the way, get both Cousins and Stafford. But,
of course.
You know, like, you know,
you practice what you preach. You practice what you preach.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, I could still, I think Ben Roethlisberger, we're in round 5. Ben Roethlisberger is still on the board. Everyone talks about the home road splits, but at the same time, he's got the best receiver in the league, arguably. And Juju Smith-Schuster has certainly come up as a solid number 2. James Washington has done a lot of things. I would never like throw all of my trust in a rookie wide receiver, but I think he has potential as the season wears on. Vance McDonald, who I would like to talk about a little bit later, is another receiving threat for Big Ben. I mean, Big Ben is going super, super late. And everyone also talks about the fact that he breaks down, except that's not true when you look at the numbers, and he didn't last year. So you can find these serviceable, beyond serviceable, top 12 QB. Phillip Rivers, shit. I mean, excuse me. Like, that's another one. Like, there's so much depth at this position that I haven't experienced this in my time playing, my time as a fantasy football enthusiast and or professional. Mm-hmm. And I'd also like to add that when you look at the top 3 to 5 guys, they have question marks around them. They're not just solid. Like, do I think Tom Brady, now over 40, is singing a different tune than he did before he lost the Super Bowl? Is retirement actually seeming like a possibility to him? Yeah. Is he going to decline? Maybe a little bit isn't enough to make a difference. No, but certainly there's a question there now, right? Drew Brees went from a hyper passing offense to a ground game. And you have to imagine that Sean Payton did that because Drew Brees' arm gets tired and he wants to save him for the second half of the season and the postseason. You know, Russell Wilson's got an inefficient offensive line, and Paul Richardson, his major touchdown, his major red zone threat, along with Jimmy Graham, the other major red zone threat, have now moved on. So who's going to be, you know, the big passing threat in the red area of the field for the Seahawks? Can we believe in Tyler Lockett? I don't know. Maybe. I like his skill, but he's a after the catch kind of guy. He's not a red zone threat. So what does that mean for Russell Wilson's touchdown total? Aaron Rodgers, collarbone issue. We saw what it did to Tony Romo's career. No one's talking about it because we are assuming he's back. But in the one game he started back last year after the injury, he looked pretty rusty. So again, these top guys, Deshaun Watson would be the 5th guy, right? Like, I'm all in on his talent, but do we think that defenses haven't caught on to a young mobile quarterback? Do we know if he's going to be as healthy after an ACL tear? His second, by the way, not in the same knee, but still. And, you know, like, there are at the top 5 guys, if you're going to spend that premium, I want more clear-cut options than what's currently being presented.
Yeah, absolutely. You bring up a lot of fantastic points, and I'm happy to see that we're thinking about quarterback in a different way. There's no longer the time where we think we need the top 3 guys to make our teams look good. There are risks associated with them. Just because they have this elite reputation doesn't mean they're immune to decline or immune to injuries. Aaron Rodgers has been a roller coaster throughout. People may still be in awe, and I think that's one of the shortcomings that a lot of myself included have as fantasy football player is when we watch the games, we watch those fantastic Hail Mary, we watch those amazing throws, and we associate that with this guy is going to be perfect for my team. They have those high numbers. Yes, they do. But when you look at the numbers, because this is a numbers game, other quarterbacks, they're not that far apart from them. The Matthew Staffords of the world, the Kirk Cousins of the world. Yes, I drafted Ben Roethlisberger in the 5th round in the Scott Fish Bowl, and I was like, what is going on? Why is nobody wanting this guy? And they would rather have, some of the names above of him, and I'm just, it makes me pause a little bit, and I'm glad you're addressing this process. So for you then, throughout the cross from your writing for this year, would that be something, I guess, would be a different approach in the way you approach fantasy football this year? And would you have your audience kind of like follow suit and think about the quarterback in a different way?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I'm doing differently this year. I think more that's something that this year's set of circumstances has made clear to me. In terms of an approach or strategy, I wouldn't say that every year I try to employ the same strategy, which is I make a point of looking at the players that busted the prior year. And again, this works more for redraft, but maybe there's some bargains or tradability in dynasty leagues. But I look at the guys who busted the prior year and evaluate their talent, see if their situation has changed, and lean into the value and gamble of them bouncing back this year. Example, 2 years ago, Melvin Gordon. I believed in his talent out of Wisconsin. I read plenty of literature that said that the microfracture in his knee was not going to be a problem. I saw the fact that the Chargers drafted his fullback and teammate from Wisconsin to protect him and made upgrades in the offensive line. I was all in on Melvin Gordon 2 years ago. Last year, though, when he was going at peak value, no thank you. I'm not interested in paying peak value for a player. Instead, I looked at Todd Gurley. I believed in his talent. You look at the tape from his rookie season, there's no denying it. I watched the Hard Knocks show with Jeff Fisher, right? And I thought, with Sean McVay in control, I think Todd Gurley bounces back. I'm also not really leaning on him this year as my RB1. Now, if I end up getting him, I'm not going to cry about it. But I think that Todd Gurley is obviously going at peak value, and I would expect his receptions to decrease a little bit because if you remember last year, it was
Benny.
Why is his name?
Is it Benny?
No, the one who got hurt. It wasn't Benny Cunningham. At the start of the season, there was another receiving back who was expected to be like the Chris Thompson West Coast.
He went to Dallas, I think.
Lance Dunbar. He came out of Dallas, I believe. And he was hurt deep into the preseason, I believe. And I think that allowed Gurley to catch more balls than anyone had anticipated. So I don't think Todd Gurley's numbers are going to decrease largely, but I do think his targets could go down. Again, not significantly, but he's going at peak value. You know what you're getting there, right? So what I like to do is look at those guys who have talent and busted, and people are like, oh, I'm not touching him with a 10-foot pole. Great, please don't. I like to underpay. Bargains are my thing. So for me, I've got 2 of those guys this year that I'll touch on and share with you quickly.
Sure.
Joe Mixon, for me, is one of them. I really liked his talent off the field issues aside when he came out in his rookie season, or watching the tape of his college career. But like last year, he was a rookie in a timeshare playing behind a bottom-ranked run blocking unit. And it wasn't until week 11 that he started actually seeing, 20 plus touches per contest. And then he got concussed in week 13. And then he hobbled through the rest of the year on a tweaked ankle. So what do people always remember? They always remember the end of the year. And it wasn't until he was able, he got hurt as soon as that offense was a flippin' mess, right? They were firings and it took Cincinnati more than a minute to find their mojo, if you could even say they found it last year. By the time he was discovered and trusted, he got hurt. So I believe in his talent. I believe in his vision. When people say he's Le'Veon Bell light, I don't turn up my nose or roll my eyes. He's got a sleeker physique this year, which is also Le'Veon Bell-esque, if you think about Bell from his first year in the league on. He's definitely the team's RB1. There's no more Jeremy Hill.
Yes.
I think John Ross is going to come back. I think John Ross is going to have a much nicer season, which I do think will take the catches away from Giovanni Bernard a little bit and make Mixon more of a no questions asked RB1. And also, for what it's worth, Mixon is an incredibly efficient pass catcher. He converted 30 of 34 balls last year as a rookie. So, I mean, that to me is proof of his duality, his talent, and I think we can all agree that his situation has improved.
I agree. And those are some of the signs you look for, and some of the signs you understand how people kind of already dismiss him because they're looking at end-of-year results. They're looking at the lasting memory, and that sticks with them. But we have to be ahead of the curve, like you mentioned. These are not always, I wouldn't even call them exceptions. We have examples of Todd Gurley. We have examples of Melvin Gordon. We have examples of even Le'Veon Bell, who didn't do so well in his rookie year, and boom, everyone wants him now as their RB1. Now,
yeah.
So those are some of the things that in your process has helped you, guide you finding the values and not chasing after last year's results. And I really appreciate that, because it's sort of the same process that I applied with Isaiah Crowell. When nobody wanted him, he had a great year, and everyone wanted him last year. I was like, nope, just
no,
sell him off. And that is, I really can appreciate that you are sharing that, and I feel validated in my process through that. So
absolutely. Can I just share?
Sure.
Let me just very quickly share like 2 or 3 more names. Jamison Crowder.
Okay.
This is like a pet player of mine. I can't quit him. I really thought he was going to do big things last year. He didn't, but I'm going to chalk a lot of that up to a hip injury, which then he compensated for, and it turned into a bunch of others, like one of those cascade effects. And so I feel like that really hampered his play. It is worth noting, though, and again, when people check out of fantasy, when they decide they aren't going to make the playoffs or they decide someone's a bust, they stop paying attention. And Crowder did finally find the end zone in week 12 after his body had recovered a little bit, and Chris Thompson wasn't on the field anymore.
Right.
And over the final 6 weeks of the season, Crowder turned 4 end zone looks into 3 scores.
Oh, wow.
That's a pretty solid conversion rate, So I think also when you look at Alex Smith and Alex Smith's skill set, assuming that he turns back into the Alex Smith we are all used to, and not the like being chased by Pat Mahomes Alex Smith who decides to unleash all the time, but the short yardage guy, that is what Crowder can do. And so I really feel like Crowder could have a nice bounce back. I see him having like, I don't know, a 70 plus catch season, maybe 5 to 6 touchdowns. So obviously a better PPR play, but I think like a 70 to 75 catch season is well within reason for Crowder. I think Willie Snead at the wide receiver position is another interesting play. He busted last year. Everyone thought with Brandon Cooks out of New Orleans, Willie Snead was going to step up, but again, circumstances affected his production. A 3-game suspension, a persistent hamstring injury that left him off the field. New Orleans completely revamped their offense. Other players leapfrogged him on the depth chart. Now he's in Baltimore. That's a horrific offense. Nobody wants to touch it, except somebody's got to catch balls there. Joe Flacco is incentivized. I don't think Lamar Jackson's going to see the field this year, especially with RG3 as the backup, but I do like him as a dynasty play for the future. Regardless, I think Snead could have like a 95 target season. He's another guy that's a crazy, wild value. I mean, who else are they going to sling the ball to? Um,
Yeah.
and then finally, at the tight end position, I mentioned earlier, Vance McDonald in Pittsburgh. How many years has Pittsburgh tried to replace Heath Miller on their roster? The Ladarius Green thing didn't exactly happen. Jesse James is still on the field, except what's interesting is that when McDonald was finally healthy, Big Ben targeted him much more than Jesse James, who was the incumbent, which leads me to believe that Ben Roethlisberger, there's some chemistry there or a preference there. And I think when you have McDonald, with this full season under his belt, he was acquired by the Steelers late last August, so he didn't have like this whole summer with the team. And now he's back to health. I think he's going to win the starting job. He's a solid run blocker, a natural pass catcher. He was used like a slot receiver in college. And again, yes, maybe James Washington ends up there, but to start the season, that's going to be McDonald's job. And so I think that he has a lot of like red zone potential, and he's another player that's being completely ignored.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all these names that you rattled off, you can have them for low value, or even some of them I can see going undrafted, and you have a value right there, and it costs you about nothing. Those are some of the things that we need to pay attention to, and can only be done if we think more, if we investigate more. And man, I'm sure glad that your listeners, your viewers, all of your audience have you to kind of like point them in the right direction to looking into that, because you're right. Your office mate who casually plays fantasy football will count all the times that they see these players fail or did not. They point to the end of year statistics and not even think about twice about what happened and missing the whole context and all those things. Speaking of which, now we have July and August coming. These are 2 heavy draft months. People are pumping up the draft. I'm sure we're going to see commercials soon on TV about organizing your draft party. So for people who draft, and year after year we see that changes do happen, whether it's suspension, whether someone's get demoted. How do you react to these unexpected events? How do you best help your team perhaps not be completely immune to it, but not to the point where your whole team is like decimated by kickoff?
So are you talking about once your team is already drafted and then these things happen?
Sure, yeah.
So I check my roster needs, because I think, especially for someone who is invested and excited in this space before we have regular season games on a weekly basis, there's the knee-jerk reaction. It even happens early in the season. I mean, I can just tell you, say the words Kevin Ogletree, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. So, there's no, like, if you are stacked at wide receiver and a Kevin Ogletree goes off in week 1, or you are stacked at wide receiver and I don't know, you hear that some other receiver, that Sterling Shepard, OBJ gets hurt, but you don't own him, so it's fine. And Sterling Shepard is going to now have this incredible workload, and he's going to be the best thing ever. So there becomes this urgency, but I got to have that guy. I got to have that. No, you don't have to have that guy. Look at your roster, take a deep breath. Now, if you had OBJ, I'd start thinking about stuff. But look at what you have in front of you, and if there isn't a need, don't just make moves to make them.
Perfect. That's perfectly said. Knee-jerk reactions happen a lot with fantasy football owners, and that is one that I've experienced myself early in my career. Sometimes especially in the Dynasty realm, sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, I got to get down to this person before anyone else realizes who he is. But always evaluate with a more clearer mind, and I think that's a very good advice. And speaking of which, are there some one mistake, I guess, when you hear people every year over and over again making those constant mistakes? What is one mistake that you wish that people would stop repeating?
I mean, if people stop repeating this, I might be out of a job, so I don't actually wish that they...
Well, there are people who plays in Yahoo will never make this mistake. Everyone else in the industry,
The one mistake that I see people fall into the trap of on a yearly basis is expecting all of the changes to catalyze and produce gains immediately. And I feel like every year I say evolution takes time. Now, I believe in evolution, so this is an easier concept for me to grasp. But this does not, when Brandon Cooks is acquired by the Patriots, and everyone assumes he's going to be what did he go last year? Like a top 6 option?
Yeah.
And maybe you're okay paying that sort of price and knowing that he's going to elevate your team down the stretch. Maybe you have that sort of foresight, in which case, applause. But a lot of people draft him expecting that by October, he'll be a top 10 producer. It's not going to happen. Like this is like the Patrick Mahomes discussion. Well, Patrick Mahomes had an excellent week 17. Okay. So, and they've added Sammy Watkins. So now Patrick Mahomes is obviously going to be, a top 8 producer, right? There's more to parse out there. Like Matt Nagy's in Chicago, and last time Andy Reid held the clipboard.
Oh my gosh.
The offense was stagnant, So do I think that it's going to take a young quarterback, even if he has all of these physical tools and mental gifts, time to put it all together? I sure do, especially in an Andy Reid run first offense. So there are just players that everybody thinks. Royce Freeman in Denver is another one. He is going to be the savior of Mile High, except I hate to break it to you, Devonta Booker is still there. It doesn't mean, and this is the part that I want to really make clear, it doesn't mean that I think Royce Freeman is not a superior talent to Devonta Booker. It doesn't mean that I don't think Royce Freeman, I do actually think he's just like good. I don't think he's exceptional. And I think that Denver should have, I think that Denver should have grabbed Geis, but John Elway is John Elway. And so let him do what he wants. But all of that aside, Devonta Booker, how frustrating was last year when when CJ Anderson was the guy, but now it's Devonta Booker. Musgrave, who's the offensive coordinator, clearly likes this idea of a hot hand sort of backfield. So Royce Freeman is not going to be like a top 15 producer, at least not this year. Maybe next year. But don't expect everything to happen immediately.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for doubling down on that point, because the excitement, while it's great, it's good, you have all this information, it doesn't mean that all their potential, their ceiling is going to be realized in year 1 or even in September. So roster construction, roster management is a big part of fantasy football, I believe, and you cannot waste this roster spot on someone who you think will be an immediate contributor. But always play around, be listening, watch the games, have a context for all these things. You cannot just look at the year-end stats and that is your guiding line. And also, speaking of rookies, oh my gosh, this year's there are going to be a ton of rookies drafted mid-round. I'm already seeing guys, Freeman, Ronald Jones, all drafted way before the 10th round. I want to take a pause. They're talented. They're great. They're fantastic. What are some of your thoughts about this year's rookie? And then we'll just wrap it up.
I'm all in on Barkley. I don't think that is particularly profound advice. I also feel like there was a part of me that thought maybe Jonathan Stewart could vulture Barkley at the goal line some, but based on current reports, it seems like that's not likely. So I'm feeling even better about Barkley, which is good because with the 6th pick of the first round, I drafted Barkley in the Scott Fish Bowl. So I'm hopeful for that. I'm disappointed that Mike Gesicki isn't really catching on in Miami because that was one that I thought, I mean, this is my own rule, right? I just said evolution takes time. But when I looked at Gesicki's college tape in combination with his combine stats, and Adam Gase, who obviously knows how to use the position, I really thought like, oh, he could really boom. Maybe one of the, like, it's rare, but last year we did see a few rookie tight ends emerge rather quickly. And I thought Gesicki could possibly do this. But, reports from OTAs and from various beat writers are saying that he's not catching on to the offense. Like it's not happening. So that's a little bit disappointing. I'm trying to think of every position for you. So I will be honest, one of the hardest, I like to ask the question and be honest with people when they say, who is the hardest player for you to rank right now, or who are some of the hardest players, because that is something that we all struggle with. And I feel like so many times these experts come on shows and they're like, well, I have this opinion, but you have to admit that sometimes there's struggle to get to these opinions, right? You have to research and weigh facts, and no one ever wants to talk about that because they just want to look like brilliant Houdinis of some sort. That is nonsense. So like Cortland Sutton to Denver, I find very intriguing because right now, to me, Demaryius Thomas presents incredible value, especially when you look at the upgrade at the quarterback position and how he was able to still produce with the carousel of ugly that he had last year. Now, again, this was last year, I believe, was the first year in like 5 years he didn't hit 1,000 yards. I think he hit like 950 something. So he was just shy. His touchdowns went down considerably. I think he only had 5 last year. I think that could go up, but Cortland Sutton to me has the potential. Like, I think they drafted Demaryius Thomas's replacement, or what they hope will be his replacement now that Thomas is in his age 30 or 31 season. I'm just not sure. I feel like Sutton could squeeze both Sanders and Thomas also has this toe issue, which I think people need to keep an eye on, because if that's turf toe and he's a vet, so that's a situation to me that's a little bit sticky. And right now I want to say, in July, knowing what I know, Demaryius Thomas is an excellent value, but this one is difficult for me. And that's where I feel like a rookie has a real opportunity. And I believe in Sutton's talent. So it wouldn't surprise me to see him, I don't want to say break out, but I do think he could kind of do what Kenny Golladay did last year, or what Josh Doxson did last year, not in his rookie season, but as a sophomore. And like have a couple 3 catch, catching 3 balls for 45 yards and 2 scores, sort of. He has that possibility, unless, and Denver is the offense because Jake Butt could really develop, and reports are saying that he's coming together, and that is a guy that the team was very high on last year, but he was hurt, and the AJ Derby experiment did not work out. So I feel like the Denver offense is one that I really I don't like talking about.
Absolutely. And there's definitely a lot of questions than answers that provided at the moment. And that is a real experience that a lot of owners have. There's a lot of pieces. We don't have all the answers right now, but when the draft times comes, we have to come down and make a decision. From what it sounds like, Sun would be someone that will show flashes. You're hoping to see flashes enough to get you excited for 2019 when they do eventually move on from Thomas, because that is not news that Elway is trying to get rid of Demaryius Thomas. It's been circulated since last year. They also might not be too happy about Emmanuel Sanders' injury, continued being hampered by injury. So they drafted Cortland Sutton and Deshaun Hamilton. So they might be turning into a new page. Who knows? With Denver, it's worth fun to watch, and that is the fun of fantasy football. It's not always just about the number. Well, okay, maybe it's all about the numbers and winning a trophy, and not getting killed by Todd Gurley in the Super Bowl. I had the same experience, but the storylines, how they unfold and keep us constantly engaged throughout every year after year, and it really fostered into a great community, and I'm happy to be part of that. I'm happy that you are part of that, and we are able to share these thoughts and ideas together. Liz, thank you so much for joining me. The way you talk about fantasy football just really ignite the fire in me for this season. So tell our viewers where they can find your work, where they can learn more about you and what you're doing, and how they can just continue to show support for your work in fantasy football.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Chris, for saying those nice things. It's been very fun chatting with you, and I feel primed and excited for not fully primed. I'm getting more and more primed and excited for the season. Okay, so I've got a lot going on. This Friday, I will be leaving for Dallas, the National Fantasy Football Convention, the second year of it. I was lucky enough to be at the inaugural year last July. Is going down in Fort Worth this weekend. If you want more information on it, go to www.gonffc.com. If you want to attend, use the promo code LOZA, Loza, and you can get $25 off your ticket. There are going to be over 200 players like Kareem Hunt. He's one of the guys slated to be there. Ezekiel Elliott came last year. David Johnson came last year. So there's going to be, and actually, when I talked to David Johnson last year, he predicted that he would run for 1,000 yards and catch for 1,000 yards. And that obviously didn't happen because of his ACL injury. But I now know David Johnson, and I believe, and he has gone on record expecting that to happen again this year. So if I can find him and maybe pepper him about that again this year, I'll let you guys know via Twitter and stuff what he says. But it's a great event. Brad Evans, also of Yahoo, will be there. Matthew Berry, Stephania Bell, the fantasy footballer guys. So it's a good time. Come on down. And again, go to gonffc.com. Also, Brad Evans and I have been doing this series since May, I believe, where we look at every single team and the different players that will boom or bust. So that's a series that's been going on. You can find it via the hashtag Booms and Bust 2018. You can also find our work via the hashtag Make Your Pick. We just did Denver, which is why Denver is on my mind, and we have the Chargers to push for Wednesday. So if you're interested in the Chargers, there's a player that I am pretty high on, a young player, not a rookie, but kind of a rookie. It's a big enough hint on the Chargers. And you can follow me on Twitter at Liz Loza _FF. But I just encourage you to please continue, go to Yahoo, sign up for our game. I think we have one of the best games. We just added a college football fantasy game. The app has been retooled. I played on Yahoo before I worked for Yahoo. I worked at Scout before I worked at Yahoo. It's the platform that I learned on. I'm passionate about it. Our engineers and product people are some of the best minds in the space. And so I would encourage everyone to go ahead and, sign up for Yahoo's game. If you haven't tried it yet, tweet at me if something goes wrong. We have Yahoo actually has a customer care Twitter handle, so that if and when something goes wrong in our game, there's a customer care person there to service you. So actually, don't tweet me. Leave me the F alone.
just come to Liz for your fantasy team construction advice and your drafting advice.
Right. Dude, I cannot code.
Perfect. Thank you so much. You are busy, and I hope you have fun at the event, the NFFC. All that information, guys, you will find in the description section of this video. I will post even the promo code and the hashtags that go out. My name is Chris Chung. I'm at FF Dynasty 101. This is a feature of Fake Pigskin. Thank you so much again, and have a great night.